the HOA president tried to evict him, she had no idea she was stepping into her own nightmare. Malik Patterson had spent years grinding for a dream, a beautiful, peaceful home in an upscale, quiet neighborhood. And finally, he made it happen. His new place? A stunning two-story brick house in Brentwood Estates, Tennessee, complete with a wraparound porch, manicured lawn, and a backyard that looked like it came straight out of a lifestyle magazine. It was everything he'd envisioned, calm, classy, and perfect for starting a new chapter. But from day one, something felt off. Moving boxes were still stacked outside when Malik started noticing the stairs. Curtains shifting. Eyes lingering too long from porches. Neighbors walking their dogs slowed down just a bit too much when passing his house. No one said hello. No waves, no welcome to the neighborhood. Just silence. At first, Malik brushed it off. Maybe folks here were just private. Maybe they'd warm up. They didn't. The very next morning, before his coffee even finished brewing, he heard a sharp knock at the door. Standing on his porch was a woman in her mid-60s, beige blouse, pearl earrings, HOA pin on her cardigan, posture stiff like she was carved out of stone. "Good morning," she said, clipped and cold. "I'm Barbara Whitman, president of the Brentwood Estates Homeowners Association." Malik smiled politely and offered his hand. "Nice to meet you, I know who you are," she cut in, already peeking past him into the house. Then she handed over a thick stack of papers, HOA guidelines. Pages and pages of rules. Malik skimmed them. Usual stuff, lawn care, paint restrictions, mailbox types. But Barbara wasn't done. "We like to maintain a certain standard here," she said, eyes flicking toward the moving truck in the driveway. "I assume that'll be gone by this evening?" Malik raised a brow. "It'll be gone when I'm finished unpacking." She nodded, but not like she was satisfied. More like she was taking mental notes. "And just so you're aware," she added, "trash bins must not be placed at the curb before 6 a.m. on collection day. I noticed yours were out last night." "I didn't put them out," Malik replied calmly. "That must have been the previous owners." Barbara pursed her lips. "I see. Well, in the future, please be mindful. We have rules for a reason." Then she turned and walked away like she hadn't just set the tone for something much bigger. Malik closed the door, exhaling slowly. Maybe she was just particular. Some HOA folks were. He wasn't about to let one rigid neighbor ruin his fresh start. But Barbara wasn't just particular. She was watching. The next few days confirmed it. A warning showed up in his mailbox, unauthorized vehicle in the driveway. It was his car. Then a notice about improper lawn maintenance. His grass was maybe an inch taller than usual. Then another violation, his porch light was too bright, despite being the same one the last owners had used. By the end of the week, Malik had collected a tidy stack of letters, each one from Barbara, though he hadn't spoken to her since day one. Didn't matter. She was making her presence felt. Still, he stayed calm. Maybe this was her routine with every new homeowner. Maybe if he followed the rules, she'd ease off. That hope vanished fast. One evening, Malik went for a walk and passed a small group of neighbors chatting in a driveway. As soon as they saw him, the conversation died. One woman gave him a tight smile, the kind that says you don't belong here. And right in the middle of them stood Barbara, arms crossed, whispering. He didn't need to hear the words to know. This wasn't about trash bins or porch lights. This was about him. But if Barbara thought she could intimidate him into leaving, she chose the wrong man. Every morning brought a new notice. A fresh envelope in his mailbox with that same Brentwood HOA stamp. At first, Malik tossed them in a drawer, barely glancing at them. But after the fifth letter in just 2 weeks, he'd had enough. This time, the violation was about, you guessed it, his trash bins again. Bins must be retrieved within 1 hour of collection to preserve neighborhood aesthetics. Malik stared at the letter, irritation bubbling. He picked up his Benz after work, like everyone else. Was that not good enough? So he decided to run a little test. The next morning, he got up early and took a slow walk around the neighborhood. By 9 a.m., dozens of trash bins still lined the curbs. Some weren't even closed properly. And that's when Malik realized Barbara wasn't enforcing the rules. She was enforcing something else. Lids popped open. Trash bags overflowing. But not a single violation notice on any of them. Except his. Malik pulled out his phone, snapped a few photos, and sent a polite email to the HOA board. He wasn't aggressive, just curious. Why were his bins the problem when everyone else's weren't? No one replied. But 2 days later, Barbara was back, no knock this time. Just standing there on his porch, arms crossed, clipboard in hand like she owned the block. Malik opened the door, leaned against the frame. "Can I help you with something?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she peeked past him into the house again, eyes scanning the hallway like she was appraising furniture she didn't own. Then, she lifted a paper form. "This is a formal request," she said, "for you to submit proof of home ownership." Malik blinked. "Come again?" "We've had complaints," Barbara replied, syrupy sweet but sharp like a razor blade. "Complaints?" "Neighbors have noticed activity. Different cars, late deliveries. Some are concerned you may be renting this property, which is a violation of HOA rules." Malik let out a short, dry laugh. "You're kidding." Barbara's face didn't move. He took a deep breath, keeping himself calm. "First off, I own this house. Second, I've been here less than a month. That's why there've been deliveries. And the cars? That's my friends and family helping me get settled." Barbara's grip on her clipboard tightened. "We have policies in place to ensure all homeowners are properly vetted. We'll need to verify your deed." Malik knew exactly what this was. She wasn't asking the other neighbors for proof of ownership. Just him. Still, he kept his voice level. "It's public record. You can look it up yourself." Barbara narrowed her eyes, just for a second, then plastered on a cold smile. "I'd prefer if you submitted it directly." Malik tilted his head. "And if I don't?" Her fake smile didn't fade. "Then I'll have no choice but to escalate the matter with the board." He exhaled slowly. She wanted him to snap, to yell, get defensive, give her a reason to paint him as the problem. Instead, he smiled. "I'll think about it," and closed the door in her face before she could say another word. Barbara didn't like that. That evening, as Malik relaxed on his porch with a cold beer, he saw her again, this time at the edge of his driveway, speaking to a man in a polo shirt and khakis. She pointed toward Malik's house while whispering something. The man nodded, jotting notes in a little book. Malik didn't need to guess. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. Barbara was building a case, looking for a way to get rid of him. But if she thought he'd roll over, she was dead wrong. The next morning, Malik got another email from the HOA. Subject, violation notice. Apparently, his porch furniture, 2 wicker chairs, and a small glass table didn't match the aesthetic standards of the community. A vague rule. One that no one seemed to enforce, except on him. Malik leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. He'd walked this neighborhood enough times to know at least a dozen homes had similar setups. Some even had cheap plastic chairs from the early 2000s, faded and cracked. But his was the problem. He ignored the email. The next day, another notice. This time, lawn maintenance. Malik frowned. His lawn was freshly mowed, edged, watered. He'd spent hours on it. Yet, the complaint claimed his grass was slightly overgrown, with a warning that fines could follow. It was clear now, Barbara was trying to bury him in paperwork. Stack enough nonsense violations to justify action against him. So Malik changed tactics. That night, he took a quiet walk through the neighborhood, clipboard in hand. He noted every real violation: overgrown yards, cracked shutters, house numbers peeling off, trash bins still sitting out from that morning. He took photos. Timestamped. Documented. Then he submitted his list of complaints. Less than 24 hours later, Barbara returned. But this time, she wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a man Malik recognized from the HOA website, Stephen Reynolds, vice president of the board. Gray at the temples, clipboard in hand. Barbara's face was tighter than usual. Her usual fake smile was barely hanging on. "Mr. Patterson," she said, voice stretched thin. "We received your list of complaints." Malik folded his arms and nodded. "Good. You know I'm not the only one being held to these ridiculous standards." Malik's voice was calm, but the weight behind it was undeniable. Stephen cleared his throat, eyes flicking toward Barbara before speaking. "We appreciate your concerns, Mr. Patterson, but the HOA board determines which violations require action. Not every minor issue calls for a formal notice." Malik scoffed. "So mine do. But everyone else's don't?" Barbara said nothing. Instead, she pulled a crisp printed form from her clipboard and handed it to him. "This is your final warning before fines are issued," she said flatly. "Your porch furniture needs to be replaced. And your lawn must remain at the regulated length at all times." Malik stared at the paper, then slowly looked up at her. He wasn't naive. He knew this had nothing to do with porch chairs or half an inch of grass. This was about something else, something much uglier. He took a deep breath and let a slow smile stretch across his face. "You know, Barbara, I've read every word of the HOA bylaws, front to back. Nowhere in them does it say I have to replace perfectly good furniture." Barbara's posture stiffened. "It's a matter of neighborhood uniformity." Malik raised an eyebrow. "So now you're enforcing rules that don't exist?" Barbara's jaw clenched. Stephen shifted awkwardly beside her. And for the first time, Malik saw it. Doubt. Stephen wasn't entirely convinced anymore. Malik leaned in just a little. "Let me ask you something. If I were someone else, say, one of my neighbors, would we even be having this conversation?" Barbara's nostrils flared. Stephen opened his mouth, paused, then closed it again. "Nothing." Malik gave a slow, knowing nod as he folded the notice in half. "Yeah. That's what I thought." Barbara inhaled sharply, forcing a tight-lipped smile. "If you refuse to comply," she said coldly, "the HOA has the authority to take further action." Malik met her eyes, steady and unshaken. "Then do what you have to do." Barbara turned without another word, heels clipping the pavement as she stormed off. Stephen hesitated, then followed. Malik stood there, gripping the violation notice, knowing he'd just called her bluff. But he also knew Barbara wasn't done. Not by a long shot. What he didn't know was how far she was willing to take it. The next morning, there was a thick envelope in his mailbox. No HOA stamp this time. Just the logo of a law firm. Inside, an official complaint filed with the Davidson County Housing Authority. Barbara had gone from nitpicking porch chairs to trying to get him legally removed from his own home. Malik read through the complaint, his pulse steady, but his hands tightening around the paper. It was absurd. The document was a mess of vague accusations, failure to prove ownership, suspicions of renting under false pretenses, and vague concerns from anonymous neighbors. No evidence. No names. Just paranoia, dressed up in legalese. For a moment, he considered ignoring it. The claims wouldn't hold up in court. But then it hit him, this wasn't about winning. It was about wearing him down. Barbara didn't want justice. She wanted chaos. She wanted to bury him in legal stress until he gave up and walked away. But what she didn't realize, she had just handed Malik the opening he needed. That evening, he picked up the phone. "Hey Joe," he said. "I need a favor." Joe Martinez, Malik's real estate attorney. Sharp, unforgiving, and twice as relentless as Barbara could ever hope to be. By the next morning, Malik had every document he needed. And he wasn't just defending himself. He was about to turn the tables. 3 days later, the emergency HOA board meeting was standing room only. Barbara sat at the head of the long conference table, her face locked in that familiar fake neutral expression. Around her, the board members avoided eye contact. Some shuffled their notes. Others looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. Homeowners whispered in the back. Everyone had heard the rumors. Everyone was waiting for a showdown. Barbara cleared her throat and lifted a document. "We are here to address the ongoing issues regarding Mr. Patterson's residency. Given the number of violations and the concerns raised by community members, the board..." "I'd like to speak," Malik said calmly, cutting her off. Barbara's lips thinned. "You'll have a chance to respond after." "No," Malik said, setting a stack of papers on the table. "I'm speaking now." The room went still. Barbara's jaw tightened, but she gestured for him to continue. Malik stood, holding up the first paper. "This," he said clearly, "is the deed to my home. Filed, recorded, and legally binding. Proof that I own this property, indisputably." Heads turned. Board members exchanged glances. Some homeowners murmured in surprise. Malik set the deed down and picked up a second sheet. "And this," he continued, "is the signed purchase agreement for 214 Oakwood Drive." Barbara blinked. Her face didn't move, but her eyes did. Malik saw it, that flicker of confusion in Barbara's eyes, just for a second. Then he pulled out the final document. "And this," he said, letting the weight of his words settle, "is the deed for 216 Oakwood Drive. Barbara's house." The silence that followed? Deafening. Malik didn't sit back down. He let the room feel it, let Barbara feel it. The same woman who had spent weeks trying to get him out of his home had just found out that her own house belonged to him. And she hadn't even known. Barbara's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Finally, in a tight, shaken voice, she managed, "How?" Malik folded his arms. "You might want to check the HOA records, Barbara. That foreclosure you ignored? The property sale that went through last month? I was the buyer." Gasps rippled across the room. A few heads turned. Some jaws dropped. Barbara's hands clenched the papers in front of her like they were the only thing keeping her upright. Malik tilted his head. "So tell me, Barbara, who's the real trespasser now?" And just like that, the entire room shifted. The power she had wielded, the control she clung to, vanished. Malik let the moment breathe. He wasn't rushing it. But he wasn't done. He picked up another paper from his stack. Calm, steady, deliberate. "Now, let's talk about fraudulent eviction attempts." Barbara's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" Malik tapped the legal complaint she had filed, the one sent by her lawyer. "You reported me as a fraudulent occupant. Said I had no right to live in my own home." He locked eyes with her. "Would you care to explain why?" Barbara's fingers twitched against the table, but she tried to keep her voice steady. "As I stated in my report, several residents expressed concerns." "Who?" Malik cut in. Barbara's jaw clenched. "I'm not at liberty to." "No names?" Malik raised an eyebrow. "That's interesting. Because I spoke to several neighbors before this meeting. Not one remembers making any complaints." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd. Glances were exchanged. Shifting in seats. Whispers under breath. The room was no longer just watching, it was waking up. Barbara tried to speak, but Malik wasn't finished. "You accused me of violating HOA policy, yet you ignored multiple clear violations in this neighborhood." He pulled out another stack of papers. I filed official complaints about overgrown yards, broken shutters, trash bins left out for days. And none of them received violation notices. He turned to face the rest of the board. So tell me, do the rules apply to everyone, or just when Barbara feels like enforcing them? Stephen Reynolds, HOA Vice President, cleared his throat. I think we should take a moment to. No, Malik said, eyes still locked on Barbara. Because this was never about the rules. It was about her deciding who belongs here. A sharp murmur swept through the room. Someone audibly gasped. Barbara's lips parted, panic now flickering in her eyes. And Malik drove it home. You tried to intimidate me into leaving, he said. Yeah. I got that. Silence. Then a voice from the back. This is a disgrace. Malik turned. It was Mr. Holloway, one of the longest-standing residents in Brentwood Estates. He shook his head, glaring at Barbara. You really tried to evict the man who owns your house. A few laughs broke out, quiet at first. Then louder. The tension cracked wide open. But Malik wasn't done. He placed one last paper on the table. Oh, and one more thing, Barbara, he said casually. You're behind on your HOA fees. Her head jerked up. That's a lie. Malik tapped the paper. I bought your house at auction, remember? That includes any outstanding debts. And right here, it shows over $3,000 in unpaid HOA fees and fines. A wave of whispers surged through the room. Board members leaned forward. Stephen adjusted his glasses, eyes scanning the page. Barbara, he asked slowly, is this true? Barbara opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She had buried herself. Malik leaned back, completely composed. I suggest you start paying up. Wouldn't want to violate your own rules, would you? That one hit. A low ripple of chuckles moved through the room. Even some board members couldn't hide their smirks. Barbara's face flushed red. Weeks of control, of calculated attacks, undone in minutes. She snapped her folder shut. This meeting is adjourned, she barked, standing up so fast her chair screeched against the floor. We'll revisit this matter at a later date. And then she turned on her heel and marched out, heels clicking, back stiff with humiliation. But for the first time, no one followed her. Malik sat back, a slow breath easing from his chest. He had won. But he also knew one thing, Barbara wasn't the type to walk away quietly. She stormed out of the HOA meeting like a storm bottled up too long, face tight with rage. Behind her, silence lingered. Board members sat awkwardly. Homeowners whispered. Some avoided Malik's eyes. Others nodded at him, small, silent acknowledgments. And then someone muttered, "Can you believe this?" She tried to evict the wrong guy, someone else chuckled. Stephen Reynolds was still sitting, eyes fixed on the paperwork in front of him. He cleared his throat, his voice hesitant, eyes flicking nervously around the room. Well, Stephen started, awkwardly adjusting his tie. I think it's safe to say this situation was mishandled. Malik let out a short, incredulous laugh. Mishandled? That was putting it mildly. From across the room, Lisa Hendricks, a middle-aged woman who lived 3 doors down, turned toward him. Her face was flushed, her voice small. I don't even know what to say, she admitted. I had no idea she was doing all this. Malik arched an eyebrow. Didn't you? Lisa opened her mouth, but nothing came out. And around the room, others looked away. Some shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Because the truth was, they did know. They had watched, day after day, as Barbara sent violation after violation. They had seen her target Malik for things every other neighbor got away with. But until the mask slipped, until Barbara exposed herself, no one said a word. Now the guilt was settling in. But guilt? It wasn't an apology. And Malik wasn't interested in meaningless sympathy. Instead, he turned back to Stephen. Since we're all here, let's talk about actual HOA violations, he said, calm but firm. Stephen straightened in his seat, clearly uneasy. Like what? Malik lifted the list, the one Barbara had ignored weeks ago. Broken fences. Trash bins left out for days. Lawns that haven't been mowed in weeks. These violations exist right now. And yet somehow, I was the only one getting fined. Stephen glanced at the list, then at the other board members. Some looked uncomfortable. A few couldn't even meet Malik's eyes. Because deep down, they knew he was right. We'll review those complaints properly, Stephen said at last. Malik gave a slow nod. Good. And while you're at it, he added, I'd like to file a formal complaint against Barbara Whitman for harassment, falsifying HOA claims, and abusing her position for personal grievances. A fresh wave of murmurs rolled across the room. Lisa shifted in her seat. Do we even have the authority to do that? Stephen exhaled slowly. If an HOA officer is found to be misusing their power, the board can vote for removal. Malik leaned forward. Then let's vote. Lisa hesitated, then nodded. Seconded. And one by one, hands began to rise. Malik watched as the same people who had once stood silently by now voted to strip Barbara of her title. The irony wasn't lost on him. If she had just left him alone, she'd still be HOA president. But her arrogance had destroyed her. A few minutes later, Stephen cleared his throat again. By majority vote, he announced, Barbara Whitman is officially removed as president of the Brentwood Estates HOA, effective immediately. There it was. The final nail in the coffin. Malik stood up, slipping his documents into a folder. Well, he said, turning toward the door, that was productive. A few chuckles broke the tension. And as he stepped out, Malik could feel the weight of a dozen eyes following him. They had all just learned something that night. But the one person who needed that lesson most was still in denial. Barbara Whitman wasn't done. Not yet. The very next morning, Malik spotted her at the edge of his driveway. And this time, she wasn't alone. Her husband, Richard, a stiff man in his early 70s with a permanent scowl, stood beside her like backup. Malik stepped onto his porch, arms crossed. Something I can help you with? Barbara's voice was clipped, controlled. I want to discuss the sale of my home. Malik wasn't surprised. He had seen this coming. The idea of having to rent from him, from the man she tried to evict, must have been unbearable. I'm not selling, he replied simply. Barbara's jaw clenched. I've lived in that house for 32 years. Malik tilted his head. And yet, you never paid off the debt attached to it. Richard cleared his throat. We're prepared to make a fair offer. Malik leaned against the railing. Define fair. Barbara's patience cracked. The same amount you paid at auction. Malik chuckled. That's not how real estate works. You lost your house because of unpaid fees. I bought it, legally. If you want it back, you'll have to buy it at market value. Barbara's hands balled into fists. That's ridiculous. You're just trying to profit off of me. Malik's expression hardened. No, Barbara. I'm treating you exactly how you treated me. Silence. For weeks, she had used rules like weapons, convinced she had all the power. Now the tables had turned. Richard sighed. How much? Malik looked toward the house. Given the location, the current market, and your unpaid dues, $450,000. Barbara's face twisted. That's outrageous. Malik shrugged. Then I guess you'll need to find somewhere else to live. And that's when it hit her. The panic. The realization. This wasn't just about titles anymore. She wasn't just losing her position, she was losing the home she had lived in for over 3 decades. Richard rubbed a hand across his face. We'll consider it. Malik nodded. Take your time. As they turned to leave, Barbara hesitated. She looked back, something different in her eyes. Not quite regret, but something close. A recognition, perhaps, that for all her scheming, she'd never truly been in control. "Barbara," Malik called. She turned, stiffly. "Next time you judge someone before you know them," he said, nodding toward her house, "remember where it got you." She didn't reply. She just walked away.